Hello and welcome to our webinar, When Growth Outpaces Infrastructure, a community-engaged assessment of transportation gaps. My name is Brendan Williams. I am the Research Program Administrator at Portland State University's Transportation Research and Education Center. TREC leads the National Institute for Transportation and Communities, one of 7 national university transportation centers, funded by the U.S. Department of Transportation. NITC's research priority is improving mobility of people and goods to build strong communities. NITC consortium members are the University of Arizona, University of Oregon, University of Utah, University of Texas at Arlington, and Oregon Institute of Technology. I enjoy having a role in connecting our researchers to you, our audience. I am organizing this webinar from home. I recognize it is a privilege to have this ability. I do not anticipate any technological issues. If we have any problems, I apologize in advance. Our presenters today are Dr. Jandel Crutchfield and Dr. Kate Hyun. Dr. Jandel Crutchfield is an assistant professor in the School of Social Work at the University of Texas at Arlington. Prior to her academic career, Jandel worked as a licensed clinical social worker in Mississippi and Louisiana schools. In addition, she has served as a counselor in community mental health, in-home counseling, and residential treatment settings. Her research focus is designed to understand the stagnation and disparities for vulnerable people of color by not only examining cases describing the lived experiences of vulnerable people of color, but also through examining institutional, societal, and individual level bias that contributes to disparities, and the need for better training and cultural engagement for professionals working in any system with vulnerable people of color. Dr. Kate Hyun is an assistant professor in the Department of Civil Engineering at the University of Texas at Arlington. Her research centers on big data analytics using intelligent transportation systems, technologies for various applications, including community mobility modeling, traffic monitoring and operation, freight transportation planning, safety, and travel behavior study. Our upcoming NITC events. This Friday, March 20th at 11:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, we'll have a webinar presented by Ana Maria Perez from the Portland Bureau of Transportation on a no crash course in Vision Zero data. Our Friday transportation seminars are now exclusively delivered online. On April 7th at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, we'll have a webinar presented by Dr. Nicola Markovitz from the University of Utah and Dr. Mark Franz from the University of Maryland on visual exploration of trajectory data. A brief overview of the webinar. Jandel and Kate will present for about 40 minutes. During their presentation, please submit your questions via the GoToWebinar control panel. We'll have about 15 minutes for questions and answers. We are recording today's webinar and we'll make it available on our website. You'll receive an email with a link to the video recording and presentation slides. If you are tracking professional development hours, this webinar is eligible for 1 hour of continuing education credit. Instructions on how to redeem the credit will be included in the webinar, the post-webinar email. Our goal is to provide you with usable research results. Thanks so much for joining us. I will now hand it over to Jandel and Kate.
Okay, good morning, afternoon, wherever you are, everyone. This is Dr. Jandel Crutchfield, and I'm joining you with Dr. Hyun to talk to you about our project, Who Gets Left Behind in Boomtowns. And so I wanted to just wish all of you well as we're dealing with a global crisis. And as we talk about transportation during this time, we want to just reiterate how important access is and considering everybody during this time. So we hope you're staying well. So I just want to start by talking about boomtowns because not everyone may be familiar with them. When we say who gets left behind in a boomtown is a community that's experiencing rapid economic and attendant population growth, and that's often due to natural resource extraction. They're usually celebrated. When you say boomtown, that's usually something that's exciting because it's going to bring increased resources and revenue. But and what our project looks at is that this growth is not always met with expanding infrastructure. And so the literature talks about and sometimes exacerbates or talks about the issues of those who are isolated in boomtowns, especially in largely rural communities. And so the area that we're looking at is Collin County, Texas, which is north of Dallas. And so this is a partnership between UTA, the School of Social Work, the College of Engineering, and the Collin County Homeless Coalition. And so social work and engineering are large partners at UTA. And so this is our collaboration using NITC funding. So what we did was study the impact of transportation on access to opportunities given the swift economic growth in this particular area. So Collin County has seen a very large boom over the last decade. And so those things are exciting for the county. And so this study was done exclusively there in Collin County, some of the cities of Plano, Wiley, Frisco. Those are some of the major cities there. And so our study methodology was mixed methods, doing focus groups, a survey, and GIS mapping as well. So those focus groups included 15 what we call environmental justice populations. And so that is meaning residents who are living beneath the poverty line, who might be homeless or who might otherwise be vulnerable, mental health or physical health disabilities, those types of things. And then non-environmental justice residents, so often sometimes stakeholders and those that are making decisions about transportation in the county. And so we also collected survey data, as I mentioned, from 205 residents in both categories. So again, this was a partnership between several organizations within UTA, obviously the School of Social Work and College of Engineering, and then also in Collin County, the Homeless Coalition there. So here are the questions we attempted to answer. To what extent is transportation infrastructure kept pace with the growth that's been happening? And this is from the perspectives of the residents there. And then also, how has this pace influenced their access to housing, employment, healthcare, education, and social activities? So a really good first look at how all of this boom has been impacting. And then lastly, how do those perspectives differ between residents who, again, are considered environmental justice populations versus those who are not? And so I'll hand it over to you, Kate.
Thanks, Jandel. So here I'm going to use some maps first to show you more about the Collin County with some visualization. So let me see if I have that. So this map is showing the cities within the current public transit operating boundaries. So the public transit system in our region in Collin County is called Dallas Area Rapid Transit, or DART, which is serving the city of Dallas and the surrounding cities like this map shows. This DART transit system includes the buses, the commuter rails, and paratransit services, and it serves more than 220,000 individuals in the region. This map is showing the Collin County boundaries with the black boxes, and DART operating cities with the blue, and the yellow with the yellow, and the cities with the local transit system in the orange. So you see most of this region, excluding the southwest corner, they don't have any public transit system existing in the Collin County. Try to advance, okay. I don't think I can advance. Okay, so among these 25 cities, partially or entirely located within the Collin County boundaries, only 4 cities provide the city or community-based transportation systems, including curb-to-curb, paratransit, fixed route bus or rail services. And here are the name of the 4 cities: the McKinney, Ellen, Frisco, and Ellen. I think we are having a little bit of technical difficulties in here. Try to go. Jandel, can you move this slide to the previous one? I don't think it's working. So let me just give you a little bit more information about this transit system. So City of McKinney provides a subsidized taxi voucher program for older population and lower income population. So this program matches the taxi service out-of-pocket cost to 3-to-1. So if a participant spends $1 on taxi service that goes to the public transit station, then this program matches $5. So these users could use a total of $6 to the transit trip within the Collin County with just paying $1 out of pocket. The city of Allen, Frisco, and McKinney, they collaborate with DART to provide additional transportation options for seniors and the persons with disability. Among these 4 cities, Plano is the only city with more broader implementation of the DART. And since 2002, they operate light rail stations and bus system in the city. Right, so next we employed some spatial analysis to show the growth of population and their mobility options in Collin County over time. The goal of this analysis is to understand how road infrastructure and the toll expansion have affected the residents of the region.
Hi, I'm sorry. This is Brendan. It looks like Kate went offline, but she's coming back now.
Okay.
Kate, are you there?
Brendan, I can move to my slides at the end, and maybe she'll be able to join and return to this portion.
Sounds great. Thanks so much, Jandel.
All right, no problem. So Kate's portion was the GIS mapping, of course, and she also ran the analysis for the survey data. I conducted the focus groups and did that analysis. And so we have some really rich data that we wanted to save for the end, but we'll go through and talk about some of those responses. So forgive me as I advance through her slides. And we talk about the focus group data. So there, again, were several focus groups, and we were able to ultimately get 28 participants of both those who are considered vulnerable in Collin County and those who were not. And so there's a really rich picture that kind of graphs onto the GIS mapping and the survey results. And so we'll talk about some of the main issues and themes that came from that analysis. So there are issues, of course, with existing public transit systems. As Kate was talking, she kind of initially described some of the major cities and what they lacked or what they had in terms of transportation. And so it looks like, I think she might be back on.
I'm back on. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
I have no idea what's going on in here.
Okay. All right. I'm going to go back to your slides, and
All right.
and hopefully you can take over from there. Do you have access to the map?
Yes. Let me try if I can advance. If I cannot, yeah, it looks like I have a control back on.
Yes.
All right, so let me start with this page 7. So the first analysis looked into the population density from 1990s to 2017 with the toll road expansion. So the population density in this study is showing with this yellow to brown color, and the density refers to the number of people per acre on unprotected land. The road infrastructure is showing with this pink and red lines. So the pink lines are showing the major highways and arterials, and the red lines are showing the toll road. So in 1990s, we have a very tiny pool section in the southwest corner, but in 2000 and 2017, we see expansions for the southwest area of the region. The density, the population density was higher in the same area, and it continued to increase from the 1990s to next 40 years, especially along the toll road. The other hand, the rest of areas beyond the southwest part of the county maintained the almost similar population density in the last 3 decades. So the next slide showing the spatial distribution of the poverty level. So we have 4 groups of poverty level. The black group with less than 5% households below poverty, 5 to 10%, 10 to 25, and over 25%. So the poverty level is defined by U.S. Census Bureau, and it depends on the number of people in your household. So these maps show the higher poverty block groups were concentrated in the central region in 1990s, which is the yellow is showing more poverty in the block group area. In 1990 and 2000, we see this high poverty level in the central area, and expanded to the western part of the county along one of the toll roads. But in 2017, only 2 block groups in the central county showed more than 25% of poverty. So overall, compared to 1990s, the more block groups showed the higher poverty level along the toll road in 2010. However, there are decrease in the overall region in 2017. The next figure is showing the percentage of minority population. So we follow the definition of the EPA. So everyone but non-Hispanic white population is defined as the minority. In 1990s, as you see in here, you see more green over the map. So white population was still dominating throughout the county. However, other demographic population, here we define the minority population has been increased, particularly the southwestern part of the county, where we have more employment opportunities and where we have more toll road expansion since 2000. So after we understand the spatial distribution of the population and social demographic characteristics, we conducted the survey with the 205 individuals who live in this Collin County. We have 105 EJ population and 100 non-EJ populations. In this survey, we asked the frequency and type of transportation usage, major concerns about access to transportation, and the views of transportation infrastructure. So we partner with the local homelessness agencies and conducted the survey at the location
between May 22nd and July 3rd in 2019. So the age of the survey respondents ranges from 17 to 98, and the majority of them were ages 35 to 44 years old. Majority was the Caucasian, followed by African American and Hispanics. Education levels varied. The majority had a college degree or high school degree, and over 43% of the respondents are married, and over 28% were unemployed at the time of survey. So we first asked their main transportation mode. We first identified 8 existing transportation mode in Collin County. That's including DART rail system and DART bus system, rideshare, car sharing, the personal vehicle, and active modes of walk and bike, and other. So we compared their transportation mode choices and the use frequency for these 8 modes. You can see here in this slide, a greater portion of the respondents answered that they never used the public transit system, they never used the ride sharing or the car sharing system. The walk was the only option they used daily other than a personal vehicle. So then we compared the travel mode choice between EJ and non-EJ population. And as you can see in here in the table, we found a significant differences in the personal car use for the work or the commute trips in EJ and non-EJ population. The first, actually the third row of this table is showing the percentage of the personal vehicle usage between EJ and non-EJ population. The EJ population, on average, we see 55% of respondents use their car to go to work. The other hand, almost everyone use their car to go to work in the non-EJ population group. The public transit and active modes, the last row of the table, we see more EJ population are using these 2 modes for their work trips. So we asked if their typical mode of use to work matched with their preferred travel modes. So for the EJ population, we have 42 respondents who use the personal car to get to work, but actually 51 prefer to use the car. We understand that we don't have that many sample population in here to have a more statistical power, but we just wanted to show how this different modes and the preference are showing in this different the mode choices of the users. So in this difference, the 52 who use the car to go to work and 51 who prefer to use the car to go to work, this means that 5 who use the car or the ride sharing, the who use the public transit, and 7 who walk or bike to get to work actually prefer to use their vehicle. This indicates that the 7 people in the active mode, they had to walk or bike, although they like to drive. So we could assume that this is because they don't have enough resources. When we go to the non-EJ population, we see somewhat opposite trends in here. 9 people, highlighted in yellow, who use their car to go to work actually prefer to use public transit or active mode. So we assume the limited transit service or walkability limits their choice to just a car for their commute mode. So to understand the reason why these respondents did not use or preferred public transit, we asked their perceived efficiency of the public transit. So we first identified 8 different transit barriers, including inconvenience of using the public transit system, the higher cost, or lack of knowledge, understanding of the service, and asked them to make ranking orders of these 8 barriers. So these tables compare the rankings of identified barriers between EJ and non-EJ populations. In general, all users, the inconvenience and lack of access points were the important barriers for all of the users. However, the public transit users consider the cost as the more important barrier, I found this is interesting because once they used the system, they found out that the cost is an actual burden rather than inconvenience or the limited access point. We also look into transportation mode choice by purpose of trips, and we define the 4 different trip purposes, such as mandatory, healthcare, discretionary, and others. So here, the mandatory trips include the work or school trips, which are performed on a daily basis with most likely the fixed trip origin and destination locations. The healthcare trips represent medical or childcare trips. The discretionary trips include the shopping or park, the entertainment related trips. The other trips include the trips to other destinations such as religion centers. So in this slide, let me start with the non-EJ population results, the table below. So for all purposes of trips, personal car is the most commonly chosen mode. Only for the discretionary trips, they consider using active mode or public transit mode. However, if you look at the EJ population, the table above, they tend to use public transit for mandatory trips other than their car. And it's because the work trip is a regular and a fixed schedule trip, they would have better idea on when and where they could use the system. However, for the infrequent trips like a healthcare, they like to use their personal car or shared mobility. And for the discretionary trips, which is more random and localized, more people choose to walk and bike. So this is what we learned from the survey, and I'll hand over to Jandel to talk about more about the focus group data collection and the findings.
All right. So earlier, I kind of talked to you guys some about who we talked to and how we collected data. And so issues did arise with existing public transit systems. And so notably, as Kate talked about the survey, you realize that without many options, people are forced to use cars, and sometimes that's not as reliable. And so that's borne out in the people that we've actually talked to. So there were issues related to what's existing, actually issues related to missing infrastructure, and then issues that were faced by individual residents as a result of this boom in the current system. So let's talk about some of those. As we talked, you guys can see a larger picture of the county and all of the different cities. And so you can see how spread out it is, and why potentially the lack of network within the county might be a challenge for those that are in more remote areas like Anna. You see here are Wiley, Salina, Prosper, as opposed to the central areas of Plano, Frisco, McKinney, which are the central cities there. And so they also mentioned other surrounding areas, Arlington, Dallas, Fort Worth, Richardson, in some of these discussions. But I thought the graphic here and the cities mentioned will show you how spread out the county is. So some of the biggest issues that folks had with existing public transit were the costs, right? And so if we look at one particular participant said that using Uber one way would cost what she would be able to use the train system for all day if it was available. And so the limit of trains running on weekends was a particular challenge. And the cost of other options like ride shares, et cetera. The location of the stops was particularly a challenge. The condition of the stops in addition to location, right? So being spread out, not necessarily being well lit. And so having to get transportation just to the stops that are available, not as many in local neighborhoods, and so not as user-friendly for as many people, if you remember the map being so spread out, the location, and then the frequency, of course. If you happen to be delayed at all and you miss something, or a route that only runs twice a day, that's a big challenge for you in terms of getting to work, getting to appointments, and other things. So those were at the top of the list as we talked to both users that are categorized as environmental justice and not. All right, and so I thought this was a pertinent quote because the juxtaposition of the booming economy as opposed to the transportation infrastructure, the big highlight here is decades behind in terms of transportation infrastructure. So the economy's boomed, and unfortunately it seems that when that takes place, it's always the big housing developments and all that happens. But then all of a sudden they're like, oh, now we got to expand the roads, we got to create a tollway and do this and do that. But they're most likely to leave the infrastructure for last. And so public transportation seems to be one of the last thoughts on that list. So yes to a booming economy, yes to new revenue, new agencies, new companies, but not necessarily thinking about how to match that with the transportation infrastructure was something that stood out here. All right. Let's go back, try to advance this. So issues related to missing infrastructure. Things that showed up were how well residents can access their needs. And again, thinking about the crisis we're dealing with in this country now and around the world, how are people able to, without sufficient transportation infrastructure, able to get to work, able to get to a hospital, to a doctor, to school, to just social activities, and even home. So that was really one of the issues that came up in terms of the limitations of transportation. And in a lot of places, there was actually just no public transportation or transit available. McKinney, Allen, Frisco, rural communities, you saw how spread out, where I had all the stars, where that is just not even available. So if you don't have a car, you're really not able to get anywhere. And so then there's a need for a county-wide type of regional transit. So a lot of people shared with us that one system could work, where there's one cost for you to be able to get between even the most rural areas to and through the larger areas, through Collin County even, and potentially surrounding counties like Dallas and Tarrant County, where obviously the city of Dallas is and the cities of Arlington and Fort Worth are. And so even being able to connect broader beyond Collin County was something that residents were interested in. All right, I thought this was particularly salient as well in terms of the challenges, right? And so it's great to have economic opportunity and employment. It should be matched with the infrastructure to get people who are willing and deserving and desiring of work to be able to get there. And so one particular participant who was very lively and engaged said, it's work to get to work. For me to get to my job, I would have to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, catch the bus, would go out of the way, get on another bus that would bring me way back to where I need to go, and then get on the train. That would take me right down the street where I needed to be. So it was a nightmare, but this person in particular did that for 3 years straight, right? And so that is one person who did it for 3 years straight, but many people, it's not sustainable. And so then you also have a challenge to fill jobs that, you know, serve a certain wage. And so again, that was an interesting quote about getting to work. So that's employment. Now let's talk about healthcare again, which is really salient right now. Without help, wouldn't go, right? To be honest, as far as doctor's appointments, her children, this particular participant, have Medicaid to take them, so they get help with transportation. But if she didn't have that, she wouldn't go. They wouldn't go. And so that's likely the case, particularly for marginalized populations, that they're just not going to the doctor, just not getting the healthcare services that they need. And so that influences the larger population in that county, in these boom towns. When all of the residents are not well, it does influence everyone else. Good doctor, no bus. So you might say, well, I found a great doctor in McKinney, for example, but since I have to take the bus doesn't run there. So good doctors in McKinney, but I can't get there, right? And so again, this is a limit of choice. And so people say, well, just go to a doctor wherever you are. But again, that is likely to happen, but it's still a limitation of choice based on the lack of transportation infrastructure there. So healthcare really important. And then economics in terms of the massive wealth gap. This was another pertinent quote where it says, "From where I've sat, it seems that the disparity between the people that have the means to have their own transportation and those that don't seems to have grown." So this is since that boom. We just haven't necessarily supported the lower to middle income bracket. Do I think that access has eased up for them as a result of the booming economy? I don't think so. And so this is obviously somebody that's a stakeholder that is not necessarily in need of transportation outside of their own vehicle, but saying definitely they've seen this wealth gap. All right, so individual residents in terms of the public transit system now, some of the issues that have been faced, hardships like extra planning time, and this is across the spectrum of those who are more vulnerable or marginalized and those who are not. It just takes extra time to plan when there's not a comprehensive system, a transit system that can make it easier for everybody to get around. The cost, again, is sometimes prohibitive for people to be able to get to where they're going. Limited jobs, upward mobility. So if you, again, want to work, but it's so much work just to get there, that limits your options in terms of working or even living in the county. And then not being able to do certain things. I think one of the most interesting anecdotal things, we all have to do these mandatory types of trips, like visit the tax office or try to get something done with our licenses. And so here, people have said that you just can't, if you don't have your own vehicle, do any of those types of things in one day, particularly if you're on a lunch break and that's just the time you have. There's no way to get any transit that would make it be able to happen in one day's time. And so think about the hardships there. That's one of the ideas. Travel time, again, for everyone when there's limited transit goes up. Traffic inefficiency of options. So this is across both groups, talking about just the challenge it is for everyone now when this transportation infrastructure isn't there. So if you want them, you need to help us. So again, it kind of depends on where Collin County wants to go, because they want employees to manage the restaurants and the grocery stores and the Walmart and all those types of things. They want service workers, but there needs to be transportation for somebody who earns that type of salary. And so this, I think, you know, is to talk about the reality of it. So not everybody has a six-figure salary. Collin County is one of the wealthier counties in Texas. And so there still is a service industry that does have good living wages. And so there needs to be employees that can staff those things. But if the employees cannot either live in the county or cannot afford transportation or cannot take transportation because it doesn't exist, that makes the whole concept of this boomtown unsustainable. And I think that that's something that stakeholders and leaders in the county were interested in hearing from our research. So here is the final slide where it talks about recommendations from the focus groups from the surveys that we heard. And so we've shared this with stakeholders, including, you know, councilmen and others that are responsible for making decisions about transportation there in Collin County. Just an expansion of the services that are already there, the buses, the trains, how many stops, the frequency of the stops. So what is there works for some people, but an expansion would serve so many others. An inner city transit, I mentioned before, that runs multiple times per day. So going between the very remote areas of the county through the main areas, and then also sustainable ride sharing or on-demand program for those dimly lit stops, or, you know, the more remote areas, or if you need to do something on demand, being able to ride share as well, and not always having to take a car that may not be reliable. And that would be something for future research, because we asked people if they had cars, but we didn't necessarily ask people if they were reliable cars, because there's you know, a difference between saying, yes, I have a personal car, but if your car breaks down, then you're back to square one and needing public transportation. Multimodal transit approach with access to residential areas. Again, a lot of the stops and locations were on main lines or main streets, not much in residential areas. So again, that particular participant saying, I have to get a train first and then a bus to the next bus and on to be able to get where they need to go. And then people just want the option not to have a car. Dallas Fort Worth, if you guys follow the news, is a mecca for people coming from heavily urban areas, Miami, New York, California. And so among our participants, some had come from those areas in addition to the residents that have always been there, just saying, I want to be able to get where I want to go without having to have a car, without needing a car. And so again, as you attract and bring in lots of businesses and corporations with people who have experience functioning and thorough transportation infrastructure, that's what people have wanted, and that's what we found. And then lastly, a change mindset about public transit in this particular community of Collin County. And so when we think about how sometimes the need for public transportation is framed, oh, it's for them, or it's for people, you know, that are needy or vulnerable, those types of things. I think being able to compare and contrast and also talk to both groups, there is a benefit to everyone for having increased transportation infrastructure, and not just for those who are most in need. It helps for wait times, for travel times, for efficiency, for having the employees that you need to be able to work in the places you need them to work. So it serves the boomtown and its sustainability well. So that is the summary of a very large, intensive project. And so we're done, Brendan, and so I'm happy to hear questions and to see how we can fill those.
Great, thank you so much, Jandel. So at this time, please submit any questions you have on the GoToWebinar interface. Jandel, we do have one question, and I think it's something where probably a lot of people are thinking is the replicability of this study and research. And so we have a question, do you have any findings related to improved transit services and its effects in ridership? Yeah, take it from
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, that's a good.
Okay, so any findings related to improved ridership? No, I don't think that was necessarily the focus of this particular study. Again, it was the perspectives of residents. And so we didn't necessarily map increased ridership or a potential solution. But I think that in terms of replicability or expansion, right? So the next implication would be to try to do that within Collin County. And I think they're definitely interested in that. But I think the push from our agency partner was that we just need to show that multiple people are interested in this. It's not just an issue for the most vulnerable. And that's what EJ stands for. I see a question there where environmental justice means vulnerable people who might be considered living below the poverty line or homeless or otherwise marginalized by a disability or other issues.
Yeah, so based on the recommendations from residents and the overall sort of discussion of the boomtown and public transit as a last priority, what by investing in the transit services, though, you would expect these residents to increase their usage?
Absolutely. So again, one of the big takeaways, if you look at this last slide, was just the option not to have a car. And that's across residents from both categories. And I think that that was what was striking to a particular councilman that we looked at, is just, yes, there is a desire here for people, not just that don't have their own car, but we all want to be able to move through the different cities in this county more efficiently, faster. And so definitely there's there's the potential for increased ridership, I think.
Great. We have a question on how you decided which cities to host the focus groups, and what about Murphy?
And so we partnered with the Collin County Homeless Coalition, and so multiple stakeholders attend those meetings, and so we began there, and we just opened it up to anyone who wanted to partner with us. And so I don't remember if Murphy was a specific location, but we definitely had residents from Murphy who participated, right? So we may not have sat in a physical location in Murphy, but if we were nearby, there definitely were people from Murphy that participated in the survey or focus group, if that makes sense. So it was a convenience sample, right? Who the agencies that wanted to allow us to come to their facility, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And included in the stakeholders, are you talking about sharing the results with local elected officials?
Absolutely. So we've done that already. There are, multiple magazine and news outlets as well. And then I think this may be canceled potentially, but the League of Women Voters has a panel with another councilman that'll be on the panel with me presenting these results in April, should that continue to go forward. So there are multiple outlets and ways that stakeholders, again, that are making decisions about transportation in the county will be informed.
And this really sounds to me like you're viewing that as the way to sort of change the funding priorities and address the need to better fund transit.
Absolutely. I think as part of one of the focus groups, we did have a local council person who, was very blunt in saying that, the support for expanded services was lacking among the council, the city councils, et cetera. And so definitely the changing of public opinion through information from actual residents is what, we're hoping will change that tide.
And so I guess, again, back to replicability, from your experience now in this research project, what would you say are sort of the key ingredients that others would need, and maybe what sort of barriers you faced or challenges?
Okay, thanks. Sure. So the partnership in the community, there probably are lots of university community partnerships, but this kind of research, particularly getting access to people who will be honest about, the current status of transportation in their community, and having access to potentially, local council people, stakeholders. There definitely has to be a community linkage. And so for us, it was the Collin County Homeless Coalition. And so those of you guys that are engineers, I'm not sure all who, is participating. Your schools of social work are good partners because this was our partnership that we had previously. And so we were actually serving a need for them and brought it to, our College of Engineering to assist with the project. So I think it would have been a big challenge if we didn't already have people in the community who already had lots of stakeholders that we could just then say, hey, this is what we're doing. Please be a part of it. Please let us come to your agencies. Please let us recruit residents from the clients you serve or from the communities that you live in. I'm not sure how it would have been able to go forward without that linkage. And so maybe even some of the connections you have to think about them differently that may be able to serve as an option to do something like this. Challenges, the location of Collin County in relation to the University of Texas at Arlington. For some of you guys from larger places, you may be like, oh, that's nothing, an hour and a half to have our students traveling and having us travel. We want it to be, a little bit closer, so we were able to do a lot of things virtually, but to actually make it to some of those remote cities that you saw on there is even beyond that travel time, but making sure that, as many places as possible are represented. And then changes within the agencies themselves. So like having a homeless shelter, for example, relocating. And so not necessarily having access to them. That's a crucial voice to be part of the study. So those are typical issues, I think, around recruitment that, lots of studies face those challenges. But I think we've enjoyed the partnership from the very beginning, and the balance, of course, of addressing the NITC funding priorities, as well as serving the community and what they needed to know. I think we walked a fine line, and we were able to do that. That could be a challenge too, as well. But working with them to make sure that they're getting what they need, as well as us being able to meet the priorities, I think worked well. So I think it's definitely something that can be done in these areas that are increasingly, right, there's a lot of booming economies going on.
Great. We still have time to take some more questions. So I'll give everyone a few seconds or a minute to submit additional questions. If let's say NITC provided more funding for this research project, what would you have been able to sort of expand on?
Oh, let's see. So I think we probably could have extended the focus groups in terms of potentially maybe targeting even more stakeholders. I would have loved to have, we had some potential relationships and partnerships with actual leaders within companies like Toyota, that's popular there in Plano, and other large organizations. And so potentially holding focus groups with just those folks who are saying, well, we're moving here, what do we want, and what do we see as potentially needs for our employees? So that would have been another aspect that I think would be interesting. It would still be interesting in terms of that particular sector, I guess, of what's happening there in Collin County. And then I think we may have been able to do even more mapping with more detail in terms of, potentially what particular routes people are using the most, right, for DART that's already existing, which ones are the most popular of the ones that are there. I think we stepped back and did a more holistic look. Are you using DART? How frequently? But maybe what specific lines are helpful, and that could have even been a more detailed recommendation then to those companies and those stakeholders that are making those decisions.
You talked about, how people are, as workers, are having to travel into the community. What are sort of the businesses doing to support their employees? Because I think you used the word that it was unsustainable in a sense, or at least felt that way to these employees that were traveling.
Yeah. Again, I think rideshare is something that some businesses are supporting, but this, again, I think is a groundbreaking study for business holders, business owners, managers, those who are stakeholders there, because they may not necessarily be as aware of what's happening, people having to do so much just to get to work. And so I think, there's not necessarily a concrete effort to help employees to be able to get where they're going. And so I think that was what was coming from a lot of what participants in the focus groups were saying, is that, there really is not an option. If I want to get to work, this is the kind of stuff that I have to do. And so I think the need is there. I don't necessarily know if it came out for us that companies were doing a lot to support employees in that way.
Would that sort of outreach be something that would make sense, specifically reaching out to HR in these businesses?
I think so, particularly again, giving the context of so many businesses thriving. And, I think even across Texas, this happens so much where there's just a bustling economy, a huge boom, that could be part of what's built into, the infrastructure of the businesses, right? HR saying, okay, what programs are we going to offer to make sure that our employees can get here, to have this business be viable. I think definitely that could be something to be considered and implemented in HR programs for us, for a county that's dealing with this. Yes.
Okay, great.
If I can add
Yes, please.
a little bit more. Yeah, so in Dallas area, I understand that there is some microtransit or some ride sharing or ride hailing like partnership with the DAR and some big companies, but it's just a big corporation, like a major corporation, which does not typically cover this environmental justice population. So one of the big problem of this area is it's just a huge, it's low density residential area connecting to like everywhere. We can't really see like core business centers or the industrial center that serve the environmental justice population. That's why the whole partnership between the transit groups, the employment center is not really easy or feasible yet. But there are some movements in city or community to enhance their micro transit or paratransit service for this specific BJ population.
Great. And so we also have a question about rideshare. How does that work in as far as with transit, and does rideshare undermine transit, and what does sustainable rideshare look like?
You want to take that one?
Ride sharing, yeah, I can try. So the ride sharing system, as far as I understand, they partner with the DAR, and they provide some first and last mile service to the area, but very like smaller area. It's not covering all the Collin County, but if you look at the Collin County map, it's a huge area. Only one city, the Plano, is covered by the DAR. The other 24 cities are not well actually covered. So I can't say the Dallas County, the city of Dallas may be a good location, maybe a location that the ride sharing could cover easily to connect to the existing public transit stations. However, outside of that, in the Collin County, it may not be easy to get those kind of partnership with the transit efforts.
Okay. There's a question, Claire, that wants to know if the focus group participants and survey respondents were compensated.
Yes, so they were given gift cards to Walmart if they were in the environmental justice population, and the non-environmental justice participants were entered into a raffle for an electronic tablet.
Great. Well, if there aren't any other questions, we can wrap up the webinar. I would like to thank Dr. Jandel Crutchfield and Dr. Hyun for presenting today. We will send out information via email soon. I have the contact information for both Jandel and Kate on this final slide. You can look at the research project. It's number 1263 for NITC. And again, we have our Friday transportation seminar is going to be delivered in a webinar format. It's going to be delivered by our friends at the Portland Bureau of Transportation. So 11:30 this Friday. And please continue to attend our webinars and give us feedback on how we did. Thank you, Jandel. Thank you, Kate.
Thanks so much, Brendan. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Everybody
All right.
stay.
Yes, everyone stay well. Take care. We wish you all the best.